Welcome to the TMC Newsroom here in San Jose remotely. I'm here with Dr. Ross Bott, who is the president and CEO of Seven Networks, but it's Seven the domain, and so it's seven.com. I get a kick out of the fact that it's seven.com. So right off the bat, I want to thank you for having such an easy domain for me to mention to people before we go any further. Now, tell me about what you guys do, because you basically support a lot of messaging and a lot of strategies for the carriers. So tell me how you started and what it is you do for the carriers.
Well, we've been around for 11 years. We started in 2000 and really focused on providing email, but for the rest of the phones. So just like RIM and BlackBerries, but providing messaging on top of everything else. And we did that for almost a decade. That's really not our focus anymore, although it's still a very profitable business for us. Along the way, we discovered more and more about how networks work and the redundant traffic which goes on in the network. And we have developed a series of algorithms around how to eliminate that traffic. And ironically, in parallel, smartphones began to take off, iPhones, Androids, and they started to consume the data traffic and signaling traffic on these networks at an enormous pace. And as they grew more powerful, they used more, and of course their growth rate in terms of volume is enormous. So AT&T first noticed this with the iPhone when their network started melting down for signaling, and now all the networks are starting to see that. We have found a way to quiet those networks, to eliminate about a quarter of all traffic, both in terms of signaling, bandwidth, and as a side effect, to increase the battery life of those handsets by about 25% as well.
That's very logical to me, and the fact that the transmit from the handset would basically be a power surge in effect. So I can.
Exactly right. The single biggest consumer of power on the handset is turning on the radio to talk to the network. And so if we can keep that off, we can have the side effect of increasing the battery.
Okay, now, in my past, I was very into presence and instant messaging, and instant messaging had these massive keep alives that kept everything going, plus you kept getting status from everybody, and I can easily understand how to quell that kind of noise. Talk to me about the impact of social networks and what you're actually measuring there, and been talking about the network layer and the app layer a bit, so talk about being in that in-between broker stage.
Okay, so the way we operate is that we have a piece of software which runs on the phone, which runs underneath the applications, invisible to them and not requiring any change, and on top of the operating system like Android or iOS. And we listen to all traffic between the application and the cloud. And in social networking, a lot of that traffic is status updates. Your friend has moved from one spot to another or has gotten a new job, and these updates happen 24 hours a day in the background, often with you not paying attention because you're asleep or the phone's on the desk. And we have a variety of techniques which sort of border on artificial intelligence to try to look for patterns that can be eliminated without eliminating any real necessary information. And so this is quite different from what goes on when you try to compress streaming even more. We aren't focused on that. We're focused on social networking, on browsing, on e-commerce, and that area.
Right, and one of the things that I asked you about earlier, which you were very clearly not part of, was the suppression side of the equation. So if somebody's doing video or if somebody's got something that's active and visible that's important, you're allowing it to come up. So that's those kind of issues of, it's the bandwidth problem. You're not saying that. You're saying it's the signaling in general that you're trying to manage and you make it so that you kind of keep the network bandwidth utilization maximized.
Exactly right. Now, so as you're alluding to, one of the big areas which people are working on is when you use too much, find a way to suppress them, to throttle them. Mm-hmm. Although we can provide that ability on top of what we do, we believe that there is at least a quarter of the traffic which is redundant, unnecessary. And we can eliminate that and lower the problem. So, there's an analogy to the world of green, green technology, where there it's worrying about carbon footprint. We think that the same thing is going to happen in the network world, but it's your network footprint. The presence that this smartphone has on the network. Every piece of spectrum, every signal starts to become something you need to worry about in the same way that you worry about your carbon footprint.
Okay, and the other thing that we kind of touched on was the way you're built, since you are kind of in the handset and in the back end system on an IP layer, you're not dependent upon the existing signaling. So as the signaling moves with Volt and with other things going on at GSMI IPX over to the LTE side of the equation, you guys are still valuable and useful to the device because you're still managing the traffic from that perspective too.
Yes, and so evolution from 3G to 4G. In fact, LTE provides more signaling advantage than it does really addressing bandwidth. And,
Right.
And we address the signaling side, which isn't as well handled by LTE. But as the standards evolve towards fast normancy and other things like that, all of that is complementary to what we do. It doesn't replace it.
Cool, cool. And you're servicing customers worldwide, and you're kind of device independent at this point. So tell me basically how your software gets into the solutions. Is it a load that's mandated by the carrier? Is it your work with the vendors? How does it happen?
Okay, so yes, ideally our software is loaded on the handset when it's shipped from the factory.
Right.
And the carriers, particularly in the U.S., own what's on that phone and are able to mandate that, as you say. And because the carriers stand to benefit so much by not having to spend as much on network infrastructure, they are highly motivated to mandate it. Now, ironically, the handset vendors, because we also provide battery savings, and that is the biggest reason why people return phones, they are also quite incented to do it. So we found that it's an easy discussion to have with them as well.
Okay. So you've got cross elastics with battery and with network.
Exactly.
Interesting combinations.
Exactly.
Nice metric to kind of understand your value proposition in.
I mean, we've hit the market sort of at the right time. I mean, 5 years ago, everybody was talking about dark wireless fiber. How do you
Right.
give this stuff away to use it all? Now there's not enough left.
Cool, cool. I really want to thank you for your time. Thank you
you.
so much.